You ever get betrayed so quietly, so deeply, that it doesn't even feel like anger at first? Just silence? Yeah, that's what this is. My own sister told me I wasn't welcome at her wedding, the same wedding I helped her plan. The twist, she was marrying my ex. She said I could watch it online if I really cared. So I showed up. Not to cause a scene, but to say goodbye. What happened next? She didn't expect it, and neither will you. If you've ever been cut out by someone you loved, this one's for you. Before I tell you what's happened next, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you feel this in your chest like I did, hit subscribe. Let's get into it. I stood outside the venue, heart pounding like it was trying to break free from my chest. The sound of distant violin music drifted through the air, floating out from the high-arched windows of the Pacific Heights ballroom. Laughter followed, soft, warm, and so familiar it made my throat tighten. That laugh, I'd know it anywhere. My sister's. But I wasn't invited. Not really. Technically, I had the link, the live stream, the digital front row seat to the wedding of the decade. Or so they called it in our family group chat, the one I'd been quietly removed from last month. No explanation, no drama, just silence, a slow erasure. I watched as guests stepped out of Blacktown cars, sleek heels clicking on the pavement, men in tailored suits adjusting their cuffs. Her world, not mine, not anymore. I could see her through the glass. Lila, my little sister, radiant, beaming, draped in champagne satin and lace, the dress I once helped her pick out in a dusty boutique in the Mission District. She glowed like the center of the universe. And I was the invisible orbit. Her eyes never scanned the street. She didn't know I was there. But I was, watching. Not from a live stream. Not from my apartment. But standing in the cold, in a $40 black thrifted dress, holding a gift I'd spent 3 weeks making by hand. I don't even know why I brought it. Some foolish, lingering hope, maybe. Or maybe because I needed her to know. I wasn't just going to disappear like she wanted me to. The security guard hadn't noticed me yet. I blended in, kind of. Just another figure on the sidewalk. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I wasn't going to march in. I just wanted a glimpse. A final goodbye, maybe. But then the door opened, and I froze. Not because it was her, but because it was him. Ethan. My ex. And Lila's soon-to-be husband. He stepped out, checking his phone, and for a split second, the world collapsed into a pinhole. Everything slowed. I couldn't breathe. Not because I still loved him. I didn't. God, I didn't. But because the last time I saw him, he told me he wanted to fix things. That he still dreamed about me. That marrying her would be a mistake. And now, here he was, smiling, polished, ready to marry her. I turned away, heart in my throat, but not fast enough. He saw me. His smile faltered. "Michelle?" he said, like he couldn't believe I was real. I didn't answer. "Are you here for the wedding?" There was no right answer to that question, no honest one that wouldn't explode everything. I met his eyes and forced a smile. "Just passing by," I lied. But his face shifted. Guilt. Panic. I couldn't tell. "I thought you moved," he said. "I did." He glanced behind him. "Does Lila know you're here?" I almost laughed. "No. She banned me, remember?" He winced, and I saw it, just for a flicker, the regret, the crack in his perfect groom mask. "You should go," he said softly, "before someone sees." I took a step back. "Don't worry, I was never really here." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked away. And that's when it hit me. The pit in my stomach, the ache I'd been trying to swallow for weeks. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about being replaced, forgotten, erased by the two people I once trusted most. But how did we even get here? It wasn't always like this. Just last year, Lila was my best friend, my roommate, my co-conspirator in late-night ice cream binges and bad dating choices. She was my person. And Ethan, he was the one I fell for when I least expected to. The charming consultant I met at a friend's party, who used to sketch tiny doodles on my coffee cups and whisper secrets in art galleries. And then, somehow, they ended up together. And I was the only one who wasn't surprised, because I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before, but I ignored it, because she was my sister, and he was my boyfriend. And betrayal, real betrayal, wasn't supposed to come from the people you love. But it did, and maybe, if I'm being honest, I saw it coming long before I admitted it to myself. There was that night last November, rain against the windows, Lila sitting a little too close on the couch, the way Ethan looked at her when he thought I wasn't watching, the unfinished conversations, the sudden inside jokes I didn't understand, the way she started dressing like me, talking like me, living in my skin while I slowly faded into the background. It wasn't an affair, not exactly. At least, not then. But emotional betrayal. Yeah, that one hit early. And now here I was, on the sidewalk, watching the two of them celebrate their perfect love story. A story that began in the shadows of mine. But what they didn't know was that I hadn't come here just to watch. I came here with something else, something they wouldn't see coming. And the moment I opened my phone and tapped record, the screen lit up with a draft I'd been writing for weeks. The truth. All of it. A confession. A story. A goodbye. Or maybe a reckoning. Because sometimes, silence is the kindest thing you can offer someone. And sometimes, it's the sharpest knife. Before the wedding, before the betrayal, before I stood outside that glass ballroom with a pit in my stomach, I lived in a little two-bedroom apartment in the Lower Haight with my sister. Lila and I had been roommates for almost 4 years, ever since Mom passed. It started as necessity. She couldn't afford the rent on her own, and I didn't want to live alone in silence. We were very different, but we fit like puzzle pieces. I was the planner, the list maker, the introvert who journaled before bed and alphabetized the spice rack. She was chaos in designer jeans, loud laughter, late nights, skincare obsessions, messy makeup drawers, but we made it work. She made me laugh when I took life too seriously. I helped her get to work on time. Our morning routines were a dance. I'd be up early, fixing coffee in the French press, while she rolled out of bed 15 minutes before her shift, curling her hair with one hand and applying mascara with the other. I'd leave sticky notes on her laptop. Don't forget the Anderson file. Yes, you do need to eat today. You're stronger than you think. She used to call me her anchor, and I used to believe she meant it. At night, we'd make pasta and split a bottle of wine while watching trashy dating shows, pausing to argue over who was faking it and who might actually be falling in love. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, in that way only sisters can, equal parts admiration and something else, something harder to name. She once said, half joking, "You always get the guy, Michelle. You're like the grounded, artsy type. Men fall in love with that." I laughed. "What does that make you?" She grinned. "The chaotic hot one who gets dumped in Act 2. I told her that wasn't true. But in hindsight, maybe she believed it more than I realized. Back then, Ethan was just a name in my phone. We met at an exhibit opening at the De Young. He was standing in front of a Rothko painting, looking unusually serious, and I asked him what he saw. He said, "Grief, hidden behind good posture." I remember raising an eyebrow and thinking, either this guy is unbearably pretentious, or he's cracked wide open like me. Turned out, it was both. He was warm, witty, had a kind of calm intensity. A management consultant, always traveling, always reading something obscure. He loved that I worked at a nonprofit for immigrant youth, called it real work, took me to bookstores and jazz nights, and never forgot my coffee order. The kind of man who opened doors without making a show of it, who asked about your mother's favorite song, who remembered that I hated cucumbers but liked pickles. The first time he met Lila, we were 2 months in. She was barefoot in the kitchen, making pancakes in an oversized t-shirt. Ethan walked in carrying flowers, and her eyes flicked to mine, a silent question. "This is him?" I nodded. She smiled wide and said, "Damn. You didn't tell me he looked like a tortured novelist." They clicked instantly, too easily. She teased him. He played along. I told myself it was harmless. We'd go on double dates with her and whatever flavor of the month she was seeing. I never felt threatened. Not really. Lila was beautiful, yes, but she was impulsive. She didn't want what I had. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs. Small ones. Easy to brush off. There was the time I came home early from work, and they were sitting on the floor of the living room, talking with that conspiratorial hush. When I walked in, they jumped apart like teenagers getting caught. Ethan laughed nervously. Lila said they were just arguing over which Pixar movie was the saddest. I let it go. Or the time I found one of my journals open on her bed. She claimed it fell off the shelf, but the page it was open to, a very private page, still had the imprint of her perfume. And then there were the things Ethan didn't say. The nights we'd lie in bed and I'd ask about the future, and he'd hesitate. Not cold, just vague. A shrug here, a kiss on the forehead there, promises made in whispers, never daylight. But still, I trusted them both. That was my fatal flaw, I think, believing that love, in its purest form, was enough to anchor people, to protect them from envy, from temptation, from betrayal. I had plans, real ones. I wanted to launch my own mentorship program. I wanted to travel more. Ethan said he'd support me through all of it. Lila said she wanted to help design the brand. We'd talk about it over wine. What we'd build together. A dream team. I had no idea I was building my own undoing. The unraveling started slow. Ethan became harder to reach. Swamped with work, he'd say. Lila became more distant, spending nights out, not texting back. When she was home, she was colder, sharper, like everything I said annoyed her. And then came the night that, in hindsight, shattered everything. It was a Friday. I had just gotten back from a retreat in Moran, feeling grounded and soft. I came home to find the apartment dimly lit, a bottle of wine half empty on the counter, music still playing low from the Bluetooth speaker. Lila was gone. So was Ethan. But his jacket was still on the hook by the door. I waited and waited. They came in around 1 a.m., laughing about something. And when they saw me sitting on the couch, both of them froze. "Michelle?" Lila said, too brightly. "You're back early." Ethan was quiet. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice even. Lila tossed her hair like she didn't care. "We went to that rooftop bar, the one by the wharf. Chill." I nodded slowly. "Didn't realize you two hung out alone now." Lila shrugged. "You're always busy. Someone has to entertain him." Ethan finally spoke. "It was nothing. Just a drink." But it didn't feel like nothing. Something had shifted. And from that night forward, it kept shifting. He became more distant. She became sharper. The apartment felt colder. Like I was living in a house made of glass, transparent, fragile, and always on the edge of breaking. 3 weeks later, Ethan broke up with me. No warning, no drama, just, "I don't think we're right anymore." I cried for 3 days. Lila made me tea, told me I deserved better, held my hand. I believed her, because that's what sisters do, because I didn't want to believe the truth. Until the engagement photo showed up on Instagram 2 months later, Lila and Ethan, on a beach in Mendocino. her hand on his chest, a ring flashing like a weapon. No caption, just a heart emoji. I stared at it for hours. She didn't call, didn't text, just posted it, like I was a distant acquaintance, like I hadn't been the one to introduce them. I sent her one message, just one. "Are you serious?" She replied, "You don't get to play victim, Michelle." You never did. That was the moment I knew. I didn't just lose a boyfriend. I lost my sister. And everything I believed about loyalty, about love, about family, it was a lie. I didn't cry when I saw the photo. Not at first. I stared at it. The image of Ethan kneeling on one knee, holding out a ring to Lila, the ocean crashing behind them, like I was trying to decipher a foreign language. It didn't register. My brain wouldn't translate it. I just kept blinking. Refreshing. Blinking again. Like the app had glitched. Like it wasn't real. But it was. It was very real. It took about 4 minutes before the sobs started. Violent, sharp, from a place I didn't know existed. I fell to the floor of my bathroom, just slid down the cabinet like someone had cut the strings holding me up. I remember pressing a hand to my chest because I thought, genuinely, my heart was giving out. It felt like it was ripping itself open from the inside. Not because Ethan proposed, but because she said yes, and posted it like I didn't exist, like I wasn't her sister, like I hadn't spent 2 years loving a man who now kissed her with the same mouth he once used to tell me I was his forever. I didn't eat for 3 days, didn't sleep much, either. Just laid in bed, fully clothed, scrolling through our old photos, birthdays, hikes, beach trips, movie nights, all those laughing faces, all those little lies. I kept waiting for some kind of explanation, an apology. Even a lie would have helped, but there was nothing. I wasn't blocked, but I might as well have been. No one in our family reached out. Not one cousin, not one aunt. I think they were all too stunned, or maybe they assumed I already knew. Maybe Lila had spun a story I hadn't heard yet, a version of me where I was cold, distant, unloving, the villain. It's easier that way, isn't it? To cast someone as the problem so you don't have to look at what you've done. The truth came out like a slow leak. It started with Jenna, a mutual friend from college. She called me a week after the photo went up. "You okay?" she asked gently. I didn't have an answer. "I figured you knew," she said. "But just in case. I mean, I saw them together months ago, at the Conservatory of Flowers, holding hands." I gripped the edge of the couch. "What?" She hesitated. "I thought it was weird. I asked Ethan, and he said you two had been over for a while, but your stories still had pictures of him." My mouth went dry. That was 3 months before he broke up with me. Jenna was quiet. That was the first real confirmation, the first undeniable crack in the timeline. Then came the texts. A coworker of mine forwarded a screenshot someone had posted in a group chat. A picture of Lila and Ethan at a wine tasting. "Power couple energy," the caption read. Date stamped. 2 weeks before the breakup. Little by little, the story fell apart, and the truth assembled itself, jagged and nauseating. They had been seeing each other while he was still with me, behind my back, under my roof, and she had looked me in the eye every morning, made me tea, hugged me goodnight, knowing. I started replaying every moment, like a detective in my own life, every shared glance between them, every sudden mood shift, every night he said he was working late. I became obsessed with uncovering it all. I needed to know exactly when the betrayal started, as if that would change the damage it caused. I messaged Lila just once. "How long?" She read it, didn't respond. But 10 minutes later, she blocked me. And that silence. It cut deeper than any confession ever could. I spiraled, hard. I stopped going to work, told them I needed time off. Family emergency, which wasn't a lie, not really. I turned my phone off for entire days. I couldn't bear to see photos of them. I couldn't bear to see people not caring. The worst part, I didn't even know who I was without them. Without her. She wasn't just my sister. She was half my identity, my echo, my mirror. And Ethan, he was the first man I let see me raw, the first man I trusted after years of being guarded. I felt like a ghost, like I was haunting my own life. One night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection, and I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her face was swollen from crying, her hair unwashed, her eyes hollow. And I thought, is this what it means to be disposable? To be erased so cleanly, so quietly, that no one even flinches? I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn every photo, smash every frame. But I couldn't move. Grief froze me. Rage electrified me. Shame buried me. I'd cycle through all three in an hour, over and over. No relief, just this constant ache in my gut. Was I too blind? Too trusting? Too naive? Did I do something to deserve this? That question haunted me. And I hated myself for even asking it. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about me. It was about them, their selfishness, their cowardice, their inability to confront the truth like adults. But still, the shame lingered. I stopped responding to texts. Friends invited me out, and I declined every time. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to exist in a world where they were allowed to be happy, and I was expected to be silent. I tried to journal, but the words came out angry, jagged. I wrote in capital letters. I scratched out sentences. I cried onto the pages. It didn't help. Music hurt. Food tasted like cardboard. Even the sky looked dull. For weeks, I lived like that, floating, hollow, rage and grief like waves, crashing, pulling back, crashing again. And then something small shifted. It happened the day I opened my email for the first time in weeks. I'd been dodging it, terrified of bills and life and everything I'd neglected. But in the inbox, buried under newsletters and work reminders, was a message from a girl named Naomi, one of the teens I mentored at the nonprofit. The subject line read, "Thank you." Her email was short, simple. She wrote, "You probably don't remember this, but 2 years ago, you told me my voice mattered even if no one listened. That changed my life. I got into UCLA. I wanted you to know." I cried harder reading that than I did the day Ethan proposed to Lila. Because for the first time in weeks, I remembered I wasn't worthless. I wasn't just the girl who got left behind. I was a woman who had impacted lives. That email was a crack of light in a locked room, and I clung to it. The next morning, I showered, cleaned my sheets, threw out the wine bottles. I didn't forgive them, not even close. But I remembered who I was before them. And maybe, just maybe, I could start becoming her again. Healing isn't linear. People love to say that. Instagram therapists posted in pastel font over images of clouds. And it's true, in theory. But what they don't tell you is how ugly the spiral looks up close. After Naomi's email, I had a burst of momentum. I told myself I was done crying, that I was stronger now, that I was ready to start over. I wasn't. I started going on long walks through the city, thinking movement would help. But every street corner reminded me of something. Ethan once bought me street tacos on that curb. Lila and I once danced barefoot in the rain near Dolores Park. I couldn't outrun the ghosts. They were everywhere. I downloaded a dating app, not because I wanted love. I wanted proof that I was still desirable, still worthy, still seen. The matches rolled in fast. Smiles, compliments, invitations to rooftop bars. I picked the most charismatic one and said yes. His name was Jordan. He worked in finance, wore cologne that clung to his jacket like armor, and had a smile that never reached his eyes. On our first date, I laughed too loudly, drank too much wine, told him I was recently untethered, my exact words, like I was talking about a weather balloon and not a shattered heart. By the third date, we ended up in his apartment. It was cold and sterile, like a hotel room without memories. The next morning, I stared at his ceiling and felt nothing. Not regret, not empowerment, just numb. I left before he woke up, blocked his number, told myself it was just a misstep, that I was experimenting with freedom. But the truth, I was trying to erase their fingerprints with strangers' hands, and it didn't work. Therapy came next. I found a sliding scale counselor named Maureen who looked like a former rock star turned grief whisperer. Silver hair in a bun, wide, steady eyes. Her office smelled like cinnamon and old paperbacks. I spent the first 2 sessions saying, "I'm fine," and smiling like I was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. By session 3, I broke down. "I feel erased," I told her, like I was background noise in my own life. She nodded, let the silence sit, then said, "You're not erased. You're grieving a version of your life that never actually existed." That sentence gutted me, because she was right. I was mourning the illusion. The idea that Lila and I were inseparable, that Ethan was mine forever, that love, if you gave it fully and purely, would protect you. I wasn't healing. I was just delaying the grief. So I started showing up, week after week, unpacking old memories, childhood wounds. That time I let Lila copy my entire English paper in high school because she cried and said, "You owe me. You're the smart one." That time Mom compared our bodies at the beach. That time Ethan said, "You're the stable one. Lila's fun, but you're home." All those little statements that had layered into a story I didn't even know I was living, that I was the supporting character, the fallback, the safe choice. I started to see it. But seeing isn't the same as letting go. There was a night, 3 months after the engagement post, when I thought I was ready. I dressed up, curled my hair, and went to a friend's birthday party in North Beach. I hadn't seen most of them in months. People hugged me cautiously, like I was made of porcelain. I hated that, but I smiled, I laughed, I held a cocktail and made conversation, and that's when it happened. Someone tapped my shoulder. I turned and saw Lila, in the flesh, hair bleached lighter. Same gold hoops, same smirk. On her arm. Ethan. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't supposed to be here. This wasn't their circle. Someone must have invited them last minute. Lila blinked like she'd seen a ghost. Ethan had the decency to look away. She stepped forward. "Michelle?" I could barely breathe. She tilted her head. "Wow. You look good." "Don't," I said. "Don't what?" "Don't act like this is normal." Her smile faltered. "I didn't come to fight." "You came to parade," I snapped. "You came to show me what you stole." People had gone quiet, eyes flicking over to us. Ethan stepped in, voice low. "This isn't the place." I turned to him. "When was the place, Ethan? When you kissed her in my apartment, or when you slept in my bed the night before?" His jaw tightened. I shook my head. "You two deserve each other." And I walked out, made it to the sidewalk before the tears started. The humiliation burned. Not because I lost them, but because I let them reduce me to a scene, a spectacle. That night, I hit my lowest point. I called my dad. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. He'd divorced my mom when I was 12, moved to Oregon, started a new family. We'd always been polite, but never close. He answered after 2 rings. "Michelle?" I broke down, and he listened. I don't remember everything I said, just that I cried and told him I didn't know who I was anymore. that I felt like a broken vase someone tried to glue together with spit and hope. He didn't give advice, just said, "Come visit. I've got a cabin. It's quiet. No signal. You can just breathe." And for the first time in months, that sounded like exactly what I needed. I went the next weekend, took a Greyhound, brought only a backpack. His cabin was small, tucked between pine trees, with a fireplace that crackled and a dog named Rosie who liked to sit on my feet. I stayed for 2 weeks. No social media, no mirrors, no emails. I chopped wood, helped paint the porch, read old poetry books, made soup from scratch. And one night, while watching the fire flicker, I told him everything about Lila, about Ethan, about the slow unraveling of my sense of self. He listened, then said something I'll never forget. "People will always rewrite your story to make themselves the hero. The only version that matters is the one you write yourself." That sentence stitched something in me back together. I realized then what I had to do. I couldn't keep trying to get my old life back. It was gone. And maybe it had never really been mine. The necessary sacrifice. I cut off contact with my mother's side of the family. It broke my heart. But they'd made it clear. Silence was their choice. Complicity was their language. So I stopped sending updates, stopped reaching out, stopped trying to make them see. And with that silence came space. Real space. Room to start over. Not with revenge, but with rebirth. I didn't come back to San Francisco a different person. Not really. But I came back quieter, calmer. Like someone who had walked through a storm barefoot and learned which bruises mattered. I moved out of the old apartment. Finally. I sold most of my things. The couch Lila and I used to curl up on. The wine glasses from Ethan's housewarming. Even the bookshelves I once organized obsessively. Donated. Gone. I didn't want objects that held ghosts. I found a studio in Bernal Heights. Small, sunlit, with peeling paint and hardwood floors that creaked when you walked too hard. The window overlooked a fig tree, a real one. I'd open it in the mornings and just breathe. The first week alone in that new place, I did nothing but rest. Deep rest. The kind that doesn't look productive but feels like medicine. I let the silence wrap around me like a weighted blanket. No constant buzzing of Lila's hairdryer. No Ethan's humming in the shower. Just me. My breath. My heartbeat. And slowly, I started building. Not rebuilding. Building. Because the old version of me, the one who shrank herself for peace, who ignored her instincts for love, she didn't need resurrection. She needed a graceful exit, so I began again. I returned to work at the nonprofit, not just as a program lead, but with a proposal to launch a digital storytelling initiative. A platform for immigrant teens to record their lives in their own voices, archive their identities, reclaim their narratives. The board approved it, a grant followed, then a partnership with a local arts school. Suddenly, my days were full of interviews, editing sessions, spoken word poetry, laughter echoing through empty classrooms. I felt lit up from the inside, not from validation, but from alignment. And the teens, they saw me, not as damaged, not as fragile, but as someone who had been through it and made it out with grace. One afternoon, a girl named Samira said, "You don't talk like a teacher. You talk like someone who remembers how to hurt." I blinked, then smiled. "Maybe that's what healing is," I told her, remembering the pain without reliving it. I got better at that, holding space for what happened without drowning in it. I started journaling again, but not in anger, in curiosity. I wrote letters to the version of me that kept going. Letters that said, "I'm proud of you for waking up today. I'm proud of you for not texting him back. I'm proud of you for feeling joy without guilt." I started hiking again, too. Muir Woods, Land's End. Just me and the sound of wind through trees. No music. No podcasts. Just the soft crunch of leaves and my own breath syncing with the earth's rhythm. And one morning, on a trail near Stinson Beach, I met someone. His name was Luca. He was photographing the fog as it curled over the hills, waiting for a bird that never showed up. We ended up walking the last stretch of the trail together, talking about favorite authors and the way grief slows time. He didn't ask for my number. I liked that. He asked for my name, and offered his, and said, "Maybe I'll see you here again." 3 weeks later, I did, and then again, and again. No fireworks, no declarations, just presence. Patience, peace. He never asked about my past, but when I told him, months later, he listened without flinching. He didn't offer pity or solutions. He just took my hand and said, "You're not broken, you were betrayed. That's not the same thing." I started seeing myself through his eyes, not as a victim, but as someone who chose to keep softening instead of hardening. That softness became my power. I wore red lipstick again, started dancing in my kitchen again. I even cut my hair, a chin-length bob that made me feel bold and untouchable and free. But with that freedom came something else. Whispers. Not literal, but gut level. The sense that something unfinished was circling back. I heard from my cousin Maria, the one who always played both sides, that the wedding was back on. It had been postponed for a few months, apparently. No one said why. But now it was set again. Summer. Napa Valley. Private vineyard. The invite never came. Of course it didn't. But I wasn't hurt this time. I didn't want to attend. What unsettled me was the finality of it, the quiet cementing of their choice, the idea that they were walking down an aisle lined with florals while I stood on the outside of my own family. Still, I let it go. I even bought myself a ring, a small one, with a black opal, not to replace anything, just to remind myself, I belong to me now. Marin, my therapist, once asked me what forgiveness looked like. I told her, "It looks like walking past their names in my mind without wincing." She smiled. "And can you?" "Some days," I said. "Other days, I still imagine telling them everything they deserve to hear." "And what would that change?" she asked. I paused. "Maybe nothing," I admitted. "But maybe I need to say it anyway. For me." She didn't respond. Just wrote something down. I didn't ask what. And so, I waited to see if that moment would come, the one where our paths would cross again. And deep down, I knew it would. Because energy doesn't disappear. It circles back. Always. And when it did, when they finally saw who I had become without them, I wanted to meet them not with fury, but with clarity. No revenge. No games. Just the undeniable truth. That I bloomed in the shadow they left me in. And that would be enough. Or so I thought. Because just when the air started to settle, an unexpected message arrived. A name I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Lila. No subject line. Just a blank email with 2 sentences. "I need to see you, please." And just like that, the dust in my lungs stirred again. I stared at the screen, not with rage, but with something far more dangerous. Readiness. I didn't reply right away. Lila's message sat in my inbox for 4 days. 2 short sentences that buzzed like static every time I saw them. No explanation, no apology, just, "I need to see you. Please." At first, I told myself it wasn't worth it, that closure was overrated, that I didn't owe her a single second more of my life. But the truth, I was curious. Not about her. About me. Who would I be, face to face with the girl who dismantled my life? Would I tremble? Would I break? Or would I stand still, like a tree that no longer bends for storms? I agreed to meet. A coffee shop. Neutral ground. Quiet. tucked between a florist and an antique bookstore in the inner Sunset. I chose the spot on purpose, not for her comfort, but for mine. I knew the owner. I knew the menu. I knew where the light hit the table around 2 p.m. She arrived late. Of course she did. Same walk, same perfect makeup. But something was different. Her shoulders were tighter. Her eyes darted, like she expected me to throw something. I didn't stand when she walked in. I didn't smile. I just sat there, calm, present, unreadable. She hesitated before sliding into the chair across from me. "Hi," she said softly. I nodded. The silence was thick. Not awkward, weighted. She fidgeted with her sleeve. "You look different." I didn't respond. She blinked. "I mean, not in a bad way. Just strong. I almost didn't recognize you." Still, I said nothing. Let her fill the air. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she added, voice shaking just slightly. "Honestly, I wouldn't have blamed you." I stirred my tea. She took a breath. "I owe you an apology, a real one. Not some sorry you feel hurt crap. I was wrong, Michelle, about everything." I finally looked at her. Really looked. She looked tired. Worn. Like someone who'd been carrying a secret too long and didn't know how to set it down. She kept going. "I was jealous of you. Always. I hated how people gravitated to you. How you had purpose, direction. I felt like a shadow. Like no one would ever pick me first unless I did something drastic." Her eyes filled with tears. "And then Ethan happened. And it was like this door opened, and I just walked through it. I didn't think. I just wanted." I let the silence answer her. She wiped her cheek. "It wasn't just about him. It was about you. I wanted what you had. I wanted to be you. And there it was. The thing I'd always felt but never heard out loud." She leaned forward. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know. I regret it. All of it. I lost my sister. And no amount of love from him ever filled that hole." I tilted my head. "So why now?" She swallowed. "Because we're getting married next week. And I couldn't walk into that day knowing I'd never tried to make this right." That stung more than I expected. Not because she was marrying him. I'd made peace with that. But because she still centered herself. Her guilt. Her discomfort. Her need for absolution. She wasn't asking to heal me. She was asking to unburden herself. I finally spoke. Quiet. Controlled. "Do you know what the worst part was?" She shook her head. "It wasn't losing Ethan. It wasn't even you choosing him over me. It was the fact that I kept loving you anyway. Even after everything. I looked for your face in every crowd. I still saved your number. I still hoped." Her face crumpled. "And do you know what broke me?" I continued, voice steady. "The silence. The fact that you didn't call. Didn't explain. Just vanished. Like I never mattered." Tears ran freely down her cheeks now. "I thought if I stayed quiet," she whispered, "it would hurt you less." I let that sit. Then I leaned in, just slightly, and said the one line I'd been holding in my bones since it all fell apart. "You didn't take him from me, Lila. You gave me back to myself." She blinked. The words landed like a glass shattering in an empty hall. She looked like she might break open. Not from my anger. From my peace. That's what destroyed her. I sat back. Let her sit in that silence. Because here's the thing about guilt. It feeds on chaos. But when you meet it with stillness, it implodes. She didn't speak after that. She just nodded, trembling. And for the first time in our lives, she saw me clearly. Not as the big sister. Not as the fallback. Not as the person she needed to outshine. She saw me as a woman standing fully in her own light and knew she could never follow. Not because I wouldn't let her, but because she made her choice. And some bridges don't burn, they dissolve. When I stood to leave, she didn't stop me. She didn't ask to hug. She just looked at me with that haunted softness. The one people wear when they realize they've become the villain in someone else's story. Outside, the fog was rolling in, soft, silver, familiar. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt clean. And as I walked away, I thought, this is what closure really looks like. Not a tidy ending, just the choice to stop waiting for one. It's been almost a year since that coffee shop, since I looked my sister in the eye and told her the truth, not to punish her, not to hurt her, but to release both of us. We never spoke again. She sent one more message after the wedding. A short one. No photos, no words. Just a link to the live stream and a line that said, "You don't have to watch, but I wanted you to have it." I didn't open it, not out of spite, because I'd finally stopped needing to witness what I wasn't part of. That same week, I moved into a new place. A small, cozy house in Sausalito. Soft blue shutters, lemon tree in the backyard, wild rosemary growing along the fence. A neighbor's cat visits every morning, curls up by the window while I journal. I named her Shadow, and she comes and goes as she pleases, just like grief. Luca comes by most weekends. Sometimes we hike, sometimes we just sit on the porch and say nothing. He brings fresh bread from a tiny bakery he found in Marin. I brew the coffee. We're easy together. No demands, no roles to play, just presence. I haven't said I love you yet, not because I'm afraid, because I want it to land with the weight it deserves. And when I do say it, it won't be a promise. It'll be a homecoming. My work at the nonprofit is thriving. The storytelling program now has a podcast. Our kids share their voices with the world, stories of loss, migration, identity. I listen to them in the car sometimes, and I cry, not because I'm sad, because they're becoming, because they remind me that stories don't need to be perfect. They need to be true. Some nights, I write letters I never send. One to Ethan, one to Lila, one to the version of myself who didn't know yet. I don't write to shame them. I write to remember that I survived. Here's one I wrote last week. Dear Michelle, the one who sat on the bathroom floor and thought her life was over. I see you. I love you. You were never weak. You were breaking open. You were shedding everything that no longer fit. And I am so proud of you for staying. There's a small dock behind my house. It's where I go when I need silence to mean something. One night, under a sky full of stars, I took the last photo I had of me, Lila, and Ethan together, a Polaroid from a summer bonfire, and let it drift into the bay. It floated for a moment, then sank. And as it disappeared beneath the surface, I whispered, "Thank you," because I finally understood. They weren't my ending. They were my beginning. Pain taught me boundaries. Betrayal taught me self-worth. Loss gave me space. I stopped asking why they did what they did. That's their burden to carry. My only job now is to stay soft, to stay open, to let love in without losing myself again. Some days, I still feel the ache. Not for them, but for the years I gave away trying to be enough. But even that ache feels different now. Quieter. Like scar tissue, still there, but no longer tender. I don't chase closure anymore. Because peace came when I stopped needing an apology. And growth came when I stopped proving I deserved more. I became more. I became someone I like waking up as. Someone who plants basil in the kitchen window. Who says no without guilt. Who dances barefoot to jazz records on Sundays. Who writes, not to explain, but to remember. There's power in becoming unrecognizable to people who once took you for granted. But there's even more power in recognizing yourself and smiling. Because finally, you are home, not in a place, in your own skin. And that's the kind of love that never leaves.